get your take on this. Back in 2013, we released a study that looked at a year of violence against women coverage, domestic violence, sexual assault, in the Trib and Sun-Times, both in the paper and online. And basically what we found, let's just take for sexual assault, of the 205 stories the papers did collectively, 197 were on stranger assaults during that 12 months. And then 38 of those stories of the 205 were on one incident where you'll probably remember it, where a girl from like Highland Park went to the Congress Theater, couldn't get in, and then her friends went in, she got assaulted by, she was white, and she got assaulted by multiple young black males. So that story in itself had 38 articles between the two. And when we talked to some reporters from the Tribune before we released, men and women, they basically said, there's nothing wrong with our spot news coverage and you can't judge it. And I was like, wait a minute, if I look at a year, that should help us look at and analyze a little bit and get insight into the news judgment that's going on. And I always try to find the larger solution rather than always blaming just the person on the street.
Right.
So let's not look at the individual reporters. Let's look at the editors who are sending them out to do these stories.
Correct.
Right. What's going on when those two papers are covering sexual assault, 90-10 stranger to acquaintance assaults, when that's exactly opposite of how it's happening in society? What's driving that? Isn't there news judgment going on there?
I think it's complicated. And first of all, I would like to say that what you just described about analyzing the individual reporters versus analyzing news coverage and the people making decisions and assigning those stories to the reporters, I think there's at least a few of us who have tried to do that with our coverage of criminal justice and the police department, where we, I in particular, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be stories about accountability. Of course there should be, but I myself have never wanted to do stories about officers A, B, or C screwing up. What are the systems in place? What is the job that they are assigned to do when they're sent out there?
Mm-hmm.
That may seem a little bit tangential to your question, but I think it's actually related, because this is what we do with coverage generally. We go for the easy, quick story. We look for the fall guy or the fall girl in so many ways. And I think it's a real mistake. But analyzing systems is complicated, and it's a lot harder, as you found with your study, Tracy. And I remember that because you spent a lot of time on it. I remember you, I think you even contacted me at one point in time. How do I get a hold of so-and-so at maybe it was at one of the papers where I was working at the time or whatever. Like, you spent a lot of time trying to capture the voices and get the insights of people who were involved in this, and not just the rookie reporter sent out to go cover this thing and come back in an hour with a story. I think in general, we need all kinds of coverage. I think that breaking news is important. I've never particularly felt drawn to it. It's not a forte of mine, but people do want to know what's going on. We're all stuck to these things all the time.
Yep.
And we want to be informed. But the theme of our conversation so far has been, how informed are you by a story that's not really reported other than one line of information, versus, if it's not an emergency situation for all your audience out there, let's do a little work. Let's find out what actually went on. And I seem to recall the point of your study, which I don't think you've spelled out explicitly in this conversation, but the point of your study was that the kinds of coverage did not in any way measure or represent like the extent or the type of sexual assault that was actually happening out there, which is a serious problem. Like, this wasn't just like, you screwed up your coverage this week. It was more like sexual assault is this pervasive problem. It mostly happens among people maybe who are acquainted with one another. There are repeat offenders, and the kind of coverage, the kind of sensational coverage that ends up in the newspapers on television does not reflect the problem as a whole. Anyone who's been hurt or assaulted, of course, it's horrible. We're not saying that, but we're just saying, you want to really look at this problem, you have to look at it. You can't just go for the quick and easy story that's going to get clicks.
Yeah, and for me, I think a little bit of this is lost, especially on the upper echelon. Like, your coverage is going to dictate how people view their world and their environment and their community, right? So you're basically showing half the population, right, or 51% to some extent or another, in the old demographic ways of defining things, that this is what they have to worry about.
Right.
Is that, and let's say it's Chicago, right? It is a black man jumping out of the bushes attacking a white woman. Regardless of the fact that almost never happens, that's what gets played up. So that's what they're going to protect themselves from, rather than realizing, especially for 20-something women, it's the guy in the bar feeding them drinks that is really the likely person who's going to offend them. And that's just not seen, and it's not communicated. And that's a serious problem, because it affects how people live their daily lives. It isn't just reporting on some some individual act. I mean, the stuff adds up. And I tried to be fair. I didn't go after any individual reporters. We never named a reporter. And I looked at a year of coverage, because I think over time you can aggregate that and look at the bigger trends.